Hello everyone, welcome back to the completed Aurelia city in City Skylines. Today I would like to show you the whole public transport system in detail to explain how it works, what is the purpose of the different modes, and maybe give you some general ideas how to design your systems and your cities. So let's start with the overview. First, what kind of options do people have and what vehicles the city uses? First, we have the train, which is an option with the highest capacity, speed, distances between stations. Then we have the light rail, train or tram, however you want to look at it. Two different kinds of trams, the railway and the loop. The airport terminal monorail, which is not really seen in that many episodes, it just runs in the airport terminal, nowhere else. Then we have the three buses, the articulated one, the normal one, and the little Ollie autonomous bus for just short distances. And just to have this list complete, there are also the two ferries and a cable car, but those are mostly for sightseeing, not really for daily commute. There will be a list of all these vehicles in the description, so you can get them in the workshop if you want. Now, let's see the lines and start with the trains. There are four lines. The first two that you could have seen in the train rides go from the island city to the suburbs, and the main station to the industrial zone by the river dam. Then we have two much shorter lines, one going from the ferry port to the outskirts in the east, and we also have the airport express that just goes to the airport from the main station. So you can see the train network is centered around the main station in the downtown. Eventually, the main station ended up not exactly in the true center of the whole shape of the city, but considering the density, it definitely is in the proper center. The trains don't stop all that frequently. Their purpose is to connect the larger parts of the city and not really serve the local street level. That's also why the trains have their own tracks disconnected from everything else, cutting through city blocks, going into trenches or tunnels where needed, and elevated everywhere else. So the trains form the backbone of the city's transportation, kind of radiating from the main train station. Also, the dashed lines here are possible outside connections outside of the city. Next, we have the light rail. It is a bit more complicated than the trains because it fills multiple purposes in different parts of the city. The upper line goes literally from one end to the other. In the west, it acts as a fast, long-range option, but when it arrives to the city, it connects to the surface level and acts more like an urban tram. And in the very core, in the downtown, it then goes mostly underground and acts as an underground metro with somewhat frequent stops to serve the high-density area. If this line was a train, it should not have as frequent stops and wouldn't really work for the main city areas. It would only benefit the outskirts because it would bring the people faster into the city. But on the other hand, if it was just a tram, it wouldn't have enough capacity. So the light rail is a hybrid option and it basically fills generally a larger area where trains would be inconvenient to go to. Also, the fact that light rail can work together with the surface infrastructure means that it doesn't take that much space for stations or even the tracks themselves. The second light rail line forms the main spine of the suburb area, which is the city part of the southern side. It goes all the way along the river. This one has exactly the same motivation as the previous one. It can't be a train because it needs to serve the local area with slightly more frequent stops, but at the same time it needs to have the higher capacity. Also, the waterfront areas are quite crowded, so the smaller footprints of the tracks and the stations and the ability to be going into the main avenues where needed is definitely nice to have here. And again, this line fills the larger area where the trains don't go. The downtown line, since it goes through the downtown, clearly must go through the main station, and the suburbs line goes through another super important transfer station right here, down here. These two stations are the most important in the whole city and are also the most crowded. That is also partially why we have the train line kind of doubling the capacity over the river between those two stations. Okay, so those were the two highest capacity options, and as you can see, the map is already reasonably filled, but we are not done yet. We are now going to add trams to the mix. Let's start with this line. Right from the start, this line was supposed to be a ring line around the outer downtown area. It serves the local areas, it stops frequently and goes mostly on the same street as cars, pedestrians. Only on the northern edge it looks similarly to the light rail with its own elevated tracks going faster, uninterrupted through the low density. it connects to the light rail or train in 7 different places, so it also serves as a cross connection between the higher capacity options. It also cuts through the big park, provides a quick way to get through it. It also crosses the river on the residential bridge and forms another important connection between the two city parts. A medium capacity tram fits perfectly on this line because it doesn't really need to have that high capacity as it turned out, so the light rail is not needed, therefore the train is not needed, for example, but at the same time the capacity needs to be somewhat medium so that buses would not really work here, so this is a perfect line for these kinds of trams. A similar ring principle was the motivation for the Island City Airport line. This one is pretty long and is a bit of a hybrid. From the Island City down south, it is a ring line connecting the light rails and trains. But then in the harbor area, it turns east and serves as a local line running through the suburbs all the way to the airport, although on the way it also connects to another train. For this line, I chose the rail-whale vehicles because they don't have the electricity collector on the roof, which looks cleaner in the Island City where there are no overhead wires. I think of these as either having batteries or some safe ground supply. In the southern suburbs, the line supports the light rail, which is running on the waterfront, and it fills the more southerny parts where the density is not that high as on the waterfront, but still not super low for buses, for example. It then forms a very convenient connection all the way to the airport, where it ends. Also, just to complete talking about the Island City, it also has a tiny line on its remaining 2 arms, only serving the local area, bringing people to and from the central square where the train terminates. Now, this is the oldest tram line in the city, and it's a similar story as the previous one. Although this one doesn't use the railways, it uses the loop vehicles. In the north, it goes to the Lake Dome, and going downtown, it serves as a support to the train line in this area, which stops only 3 times after the main station, while the tram stops much more frequently. This tram line also spends the most time underground compared to other lines, as it enters the residential areas around the canal. It resurfaces all the way in front of the library past the main train station, so it forms some sort of a medium capacity underground metro through the downtown. After the library, it also serves as a bit of a ring connection connecting the train with a light rail while also providing a river crossing. It then goes all the way to the airport, where it terminates at the same station as the previously mentioned line. And we have the tram line from the ride video for last. So this one doesn't do ring function at all, but serves as a support to the industrial train line, as a filler of smaller gaps in the area. It goes through the whole river island, continues on the waterfront, but since it's a support to the train line, it doesn't need to be a light rail like on the other side of the river. When it reaches the super interchange, it turns north, crosses all the other lines at the main train station, and then continues into the canal valley and works there as a local connection. So overall, we have a nice web of transportation modes throughout the whole city. The trains formed the backbone, light rail filled large gaps, trams the medium gaps, and created some rings, and now we must not forget the buses, which are going to fill the small gaps and also form some partial rings further in the outskirts. Also, we have some short local lines here and there. Anyway, this map is getting already a bit complicated, so we will go over the bus lines in a bit more detail while looking at the city's parts, since buses don't cross the river anyway. I didn't include ferries, cable cars, and the airport monorail in here, as those are not really vital parts of the system. Alright, so the downtown part. Looking at it now, the buses pretty much form a ring system around this whole part. This line, for example, is a connector between all the other higher capacity systems. It goes from the Lake Dome and all the way down to the shopping center and serves the residential areas, the medium residential areas in between. Similar story for this line. It's much longer, it just goes on the edges, connects all the higher density stuff, or the higher capacity stuff, while providing more stops in between. It connects, for example, the library, the ferry port, and all the waterfront places in the north. In the downtown, there is the oldest bus line, which got changed recently. I made it eventually go between that southeast terminal to the sports center, but now that I look at it, it could have been stretched all the way to that shopping center as well, because it would provide a direct path there for people living in that area below the big park from this view. This line basically fills the smallest gaps in the greater downtown area, and all these three could basically be a single ring line. But that would create a couple of issues, so I intentionally made them separated because, for example, this third line down here has the most capacity. It kind of needs that because it's going through some high density areas, so it kind of favors the longer articulated buses. But on the other hand, if those were going from that dome into the shopping center, or the first line that I showed here, then that would be kind of useless. They would be running mostly half empty or something like that. So it's much better to just divide these lines into three, doesn't really matter how many, but they are sharing the terminus stations basically. But this works, this kind of works. Also on the top here we have a tiny line with those tiny Ollie buses which just go to the low density residential areas there on the top. Someone asked me in the comments with some previous videos, I think when I built that area, that the area is kind of too far away from the city. I should probably provide some kind of a bus service to it. So there it is. It's a perfect opportunity to use the Ollies in the downtown area. So there it goes. This view kind of stresses the importance of the main station. It connects all 4 train lines, 1 light rail line, 2 trams, and a bus line. Originally, it wasn't planned for this configuration, so it's not super optimally shaped. The individual stops are a bit all over the place. The bus terminal there on the left, the underground stations for trams and light rail on the right, and below the train platforms, but the whole place is connected really well with all kinds of paths through the train station and even underground, as you can see here, so people can easily walk around. Moving to the suburbs part across the river, we can start at the main transfer station. This is the main entrance to the suburbs, or to the downtown from the suburbs. Here we have 2 train lines, 1 light rail and 1 bus line. The light rail is obviously the one that just goes along the river. The bus line is specifically designed to bring people to and from this station. It has the station roughly in the middle of its length, and again, it just goes into all these small gaps and fills them. On both of its ends, it connects to other lines as well, so everything in this place is just nicely connected, and the bus line kind of does the ring functionality. The second bus line is exactly the same. It connects the higher capacity options, so people can transfer more conveniently, but just so it's not like a one-trick pony line, it also connects to the cable car, goes a bit more to the low-density area, and finishes at the waterfront, at the light rail station. No need for more lines in the suburbs, it's a much smaller city part after all. Both of these lines have the normal buses, even though I'm kind of alternating between the articulated and the normal ones, just so to have more variety. And we finish off with the local Ollie lines. First ones run through the airport, office areas, not super necessary, but it looks nice. Then we have 2 lines, the oldest Ollie lines by the way, working in the industrial zone, centered around the train station, which is right in the middle. And of course the university campus. Here I don't even need to highlight it, because it simply runs on the red road through the center. This line goes across the river and technically connects the light rail and the tram on the other side, so it might be used for transfers too, but probably no one does that, so it's mostly just for the university. Yeah, sure, all the Ollie lines are kind of as a decoration. They are not really like super necessary. It's not like the traffic is going to collapse without them, you know? So, to sum this up, at the start, I wanted to go for that radiating high-capacity options, going from some huge main station. It kind of ended up being like that, but not completely, which is nice, at least it's a bit more interesting that way. Then we added the trams to form some ring connections and fill the gaps in between the trains and light rail, and we eventually sprinkled some bus lines around to complete it. So the system respects the hierarchy, the strengths of the vehicles. It doesn't limit the trains, for example, so that they can go fast and far. The light rail works where the trains would be a bit too clunky, but a short tram would be too weak, and the trams fill gaps and connect all the stuff. And buses on the bottom of the food chain, they just fill all the smallest gaps and wrap up the necessary connection where we don't have any other options. I'm sure it's not perfect, there could be many improvements, already mentioned some, but overall it works. It's used by a lot of people, it saves a lot of car traffic, and most importantly, it looks nice, with all the vehicles moving around, people boarding and getting off, so a successful system just because of that. Anyway, you can still expect some more stuff from Aurelia. I am planning at least some final cinematic overview of the city and a big supercut of all the episodes to see the city building progression over those past 3.5 years. So while we are done with building, we can still enjoy the city. That's kind of why I build it, right? Anyway guys, thank you for watching today's video. Hope you liked it. Hope you learned something, maybe, from this design of the public transport. You can use it adapted to your city. But anyway, if you liked today's video, you can do the usual to help it and help the channel. That is, of course, clicking the thumbs up below the video, leaving some comment, sharing the video if you think someone else might like it, and subscribing to the channel if you're new here. Also, big thanks to all the channel supporters that decided to directly support the channel through the join button below or the link in the description to become a channel member. Thank you guys again, and I will see you next time.